Welcome to Achieve Wealth through value-add real estate investing. This is the show where the guru hype is banned and you get direct insights from commercial real estate operators. If you're a passive investor, this show can help you better understand investment opportunities. And if you're an active investor, the lessons from each episode can help you to become more effective in your own deals. Now, here's your host, investor and author, James Kandasamy.
Hey audience, welcome today to Achieve Wealth Podcast. I'm James Kandasamy and we're going to be talking to Jason Pero from Pennsylvania. Jason owns almost around 900 units, but the fun part is, he has like over 600 units on his own, and a lot of it's at duplexes, quads, and small multifamilies, right? And he recently started syndicating around 300 units. Hey, Jason, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me, James. I'm glad to be here.
Awesome. Thanks for coming in to the show. I'm always impressed with the people who has built up that many unit count, 600 units on your own without syndication, right? So you're basically an independent rental owner, what we call it. I just want to go deeper into that. Can you briefly describe how did you accumulate these 600 units and how many years did it take?
Sure. So my wife and I started in 2001. We were, even before we were married, a few years out of college, and we bought our first duplex. And we did it the old-fashioned way. We saved, we both worked. We saved one person's salary and saved that towards our down payments. And we would go with, just traditional bank financing, 15-year mortgages, 75% loan to value. And we just went really slow and steady early on. So in 2001, it was a 2-unit. In 2002, it was another 2-unit and a 4-unit. And then the next year, it was a 4-unit.
Hold on, I need to clarify something. So did you come out from college and start doing this?
Yeah, so I graduated in 1999.
Okay.
And started working.
Okay.
And I didn't know a whole lot about money growing up, and started making a little bit of money out of college. But I realized I wanted at that time I just wanted to build wealth and be a millionaire, and all that kind of stuff. And I learned one of my internships. I learned about rental properties, and that seems like all the wealthy people had their money in real estate.
Okay.
So I started doing all my research and reading books and trying to talk to different people that own real estate. And so we were able to do that in 2001, and just kind of went slow and steady. And so my wife worked as a pharmaceutical sales representative. I did that for a few years as well, and then got into medical device sales. And so as we, each year we'd buy a few rental properties, and along the way, some sort of like career changing deal would come along. 2005, we built up to 23 units, and then all of a sudden, met a guy that had 56 units for sale that he was willing to hold the paper on in owner finance. And so that took us from 23 to 79 overnight. And then we just kind of kept the same process, saving our money, buying a couple properties a year. And then 2008 hit, and there was a ton of property that was getting foreclosed on. So I was buying up singles and doubles and triples as fast as I could, rehabbing them, refinancing them, getting my money back, and repeating the process. So we did a lot of that from like 2008 through 2012 when I left my day job. So at that time we had about 290 units. And again, we were living like way below our means, reinvesting everything back into the business. So we just put a ton of our own sweat and money into the properties in those early years. And we just kept buying over the last several years. But so it's been 7 years since I left my day job. And when I was working a W-2 job for a living, I'd always said I was a little bit nervous to take on private money or deal with another investor, because I just felt maybe I was afraid, but I felt like from a mental and emotional standpoint, I wanted to be there for that investor. I didn't want anything to go wrong. And I knew if I was a traveling salesperson and I'm working 3 hours away, God forbid something goes wrong, I didn't want anything to happen to that investor's money. So once I quit the day job and sort of, like on my own in my own portfolio every day, started networking with and meeting private lenders, private investors, and did a bunch of that over a period of years. So more properties that were owner financed, more of these hard money loans from loan sharks, guys that want to charge you 10, 12, 15%, but we're able to get into more and more properties like that. And all the while, kind of heard about syndication, knew what it was, didn't really have the confidence, I think, or just was missing like one piece of the puzzle. And honestly, when you and I met at Rod Cleave's house a little over a year and a half ago, something in that weekend just clicked. I said, "No, I know how to do this. This is easy." And from that,
should be easier than buying.
Yeah, and then from that point on, I found a great deal. Like the first syndication we did, found a great deal that we were able to bring investors in on. And then found another, and now we have another thing in the pipeline. So it just everything kind of builds on itself, and have this natural progression. So, sorry, that was a really long answer.
No, I mean, I really enjoyed, but I want to go a bit back to the beginning when you started, right? Because a lot of fresh out of school, right? A lot of graduates or anybody coming out from school, I'm just trying to see how they can get the similar mindset, right? How can they walk that steps that you took? Because you said you graduated in 1999 and 2001 you started buying, and you said your hunch for real estate, you got it during your internship, right? But was there like any mentor to tell you to buy, or you think that, okay, I can do this? And what was that aha moment that pushed you towards that comfort? I mean, out of your comfort zone to buy your first house.
So when I'll back up to when I had when I was in college, I did a number of internships with financial planning companies. My original career, I thought I was going to be a financial planner. I never did that, but I did a few internships, and during one of them, the financial planners had me going through clients' files and setting up appointments to meet with them. And one of the things I'm sitting there learning, and I'm like, oh my gosh, how does like a dual income family, like a doctor and a lawyer, only have a net worth of, they're making $500,000 a year, but their net worth is like $50,000, and then I'd see another file that, these two school teachers may be making a combined income of 75 or 80,000 a year, had a net worth of like 5 million. Wow. And I was like, oh, well, they own a bunch of rental properties. And I'm like, well, what's that? And so somebody kind of gave me the, that, well, hey, this is how a lot of wealthy people have money in real estate. So got thinking, and I really wanted to go down that path, and of becoming a millionaire. And well, how do I do that? And I read Rich Dad Poor Dad. I read The Millionaire Next Door. So it was, the Millionaire Next Door talks about, living below your means, and that most millionaires, don't drive, Lamborghinis, but they drive, a nice used Honda or Toyota and things like that. So it was reading, learning some of these mindset things. And first job out of college, it was a kind of an entry-level sales job, but there was a guy there that had a few rental properties, and so then I'm like, man, this seems really interesting. What do you do? How do you do it? And I started asking him questions, and he was telling me to read the same books that I had just read, and kind of the pieces were coming together. I'm like, well, if I want to be a millionaire, I have to make my money work for me. And so I was putting money in my 401k and starting IRAs, but I also saved every available penny I could, and so then I was talking around to family, friends, and just, maybe like kind of not real mentors, but people that were maybe my parents' age that I knew, that they knew. And I said, hey, does anybody know about rental property? And it turns out that one of their friends or people they were acquainted with owned rental property. And they said, hey, we might have a property for sale. Hey, come take a look at it. And it was like a $32,000 duplex. And it, I mean, not a lot to speak of, but I had saved up, about $5,000, and it was enough for at the time they had like first time home buyer loan program. So I had enough money for a down payment, got a decent loan on it. So I only had to put like 10% down, then closing costs and all that kind of stuff. But got into it, and the rents at that time were like, for two-bedroom apartments, they were $375 a month. And I raised the rents to $500.
Got it.
And all of a sudden I'm making money, and I said, wow, these cool. Payments are paying for my student loans. I need to buy another one so I can pay for my car payment. And I started thinking about it in those terms. And so like they were a mentor in a sense, the guys that sold me my first series of properties, because I mean, they were the typical, like they had a W-2 job, retired from that, after, 40 years in a gold watch kind of thing. But they had, at their peak, they maybe had 25 or 30 rental units. And, they never saw real estate as a full-time endeavor, but they saw it as, hey, it's a great way to build extra wealth for retirement. And so I remember it vividly. I bought several properties from these guys, and I met this guy, the first formal mentor I had in the business in 2005. And I was doing my walkthrough of this property with the guys that sold me a handful of my first units. And we were on top of a roof, looking at this roof on a property I was looking to buy. And I asked him, I said, hey, I met this really interesting guy by the name of Richard. And he has 130 rentals. That's all he does. What do you think about like real estate as a full-time thing? And he said, man, I don't know. I don't know how anybody could do this full time. And he just really poo-pooed the idea. But then I met and went with this guy, Richard. He goes by the name Dick. But I met with Dick, and I was like really impressed with this guy. He shows me all of his rental properties and says, hey, you give me 10% down and I'll hold the paper. And he seemed like he had a really good job with General Electric. Was a nice enough guy, but he had this little empire of like properties. I thought that was the coolest thing in the world. And he was making at the time what I thought was a lot of money. And he was doing a lot of good things. He had enough money to get back to charity, and he seemed to travel and do live, a life that he wanted to live. And he worked hard, but he didn't have to work for the man. He was doing his own thing. And so he, after we closed on that 56 unit deal, he really became that mentor to me. And it always stuck with me that, even though we've sort of grown apart and we don't see each other nearly as much as I'd like to these days, I've sort of taken what he's done for me. And I try to do that with a lot of younger investors. And I just was telling somebody this a week or two ago that I feel like our industry is, certainly there's people that don't want to help, but I would say more often than not, there's people are more than willing to show others the path and say, hey, look, I think I can help you out. You don't want anybody to take too much of your time and make it a full-time job to mentor somebody. But I think, as a group, most of us real estate entrepreneurs tend to be good people, right? And just like it kind of, as some people showed you the way coming into it, other people, you can help these younger guys and gals out too. So I think, for your younger audience members, like the key is maybe just to try and meet people that have been doing it and become friendly with them, ask them questions. And they're, we all like to talk about our successes and our failures and all that stuff. And that's in the, you buy them a coffee or a beer or a lunch or something like that. And, and
absolutely,
and you can soak it up.
Yeah. That's just a very impressive build-up of your rental portfolio, and I'm just trying to get that time where you were pushed over the cliff, right? So pushed over the cliff to be successful, right? And I think the reason why you can correct me. You had a lot of desire to become a millionaire, right? So after your school, and you saw that you have a lot of desire, and you went and seeked out a lot of information from different people, right? And then, so I think that has really, it's a mindset that you really want to do it, has pushed you towards buying all this rental, taking all that information, and really taking action, right? Which I think is very impressive. And a lot of college graduates or any high school graduate, anybody who have finished their studies, they can do exactly as what you're doing, right? But they have to have that desire to come to your level, right? To be a millionaire and go and seek that information, take the risk, right? So I think that's what you have done very well up to now, right? And you are right. Usually, real estate entrepreneurs usually share a lot of information, and it's just whether the whoever receiving the information is going to go and take action or not, right? That's
Right.
very important. So that's very, very interesting. And the 900 units that you have, a lot of it is duplexes, quads. And can you out of the 600 units that you own on your own, I think 300 is syndicated. So how many of it is duplexes, quads, and how many of it is like a small multifamily? Do you have that number?
So I, out of that 600, there's about 120 that I've ended up, I still technically own, but I'm holding the paper. I've sold them on land contract. And so about 120 to 150 that are that smaller single family duplex quad. And I've tried to hold on to the things that are, say, 8 units or above. And
got it.
And I think for every big deal we do, I sort of have this internal mental rule that trying to evolve the portfolio. And so, with a lot of that smaller stuff, it's starting to spin off the smaller properties, and whether it's selling it to and holding the financing to a up and coming real estate investor, or just selling it on the open market and divesting of it. I think every time you pick up a 205 unit or 100 unit, that becomes that becomes your focus, and then you don't want the quality of service or the quality of that duplex or quad to suffer. You kind of graduate and move on into newer things. And so at some point, in all of our careers, a 10 unit or 20 unit seemed to be the biggest thing in the world. But, ultimately when you close bigger and bigger projects, that becomes small.
So small, right? Yeah.
Yeah. So I think it's important to evolve the portfolio. And so we have been in the process of trying to spin off the smaller properties, but in a controlled, smart way. So we're not, you don't want to give them away, but at the same time, I don't want to be managing those same things 10 or 20 years from now either.
Yeah. Yeah. So do you think, right now you have moved from duplexes, quad to smaller multifamilies, 50 something units, and you said you hold a note for 100 something units. Now you have moved to 200 unit syndication, 100 unit syndication, right? So why did you move from owning on your own to a syndication model?
So it was interesting. I knew at some point that if real estate is all that I did, I'd run out of my own available money. We have to have money to live on, and you reinvest into the business. But in order to take down, say, a $4 million or a $10 million project, it took me a while to wrap my head around that. I used to think that, okay, I'll refinance my portfolio and use that money to buy into a larger property. But as you see with a lot of these larger properties, the types that people raise money for a syndication, is the timeline is a heck of a lot faster than what you can do a refinance in. So realize that, if you want to lock up a 100 unit property, you 60 days, 90 days. These processes move fairly quickly. So that was one thing. The other part was, I became friends with a gentleman that was my co-GP on the units we syndicated. And, we really said, hey, we should buy real estate together, and we could create some sort of offering. And I just wasn't thinking big enough. And then when this 86 unit came along, I said, this is perfect. The light bulb went off, and said, hey, we need to raise $1.5 million, and we'll go out and get agency financing. And it went really easy. And, you can still end up having the control. So for me, a little bit of it was control, a little bit of it was, not just from an ego standpoint, but, I think we do a really great job of running and managing the property. I like the idea of being a majority owner of the property. So I felt like, well, yeah, maybe I only own 15% of the deal, but I'm the majority owner as a 15% owner in the deal. And then you can get into higher quality property that appreciates as the economy goes. We can be much more manipulated by cap rates and just has a much higher upside. And I guess what I like to say, predictability. So the problem I found with the duplexes and the quads was that, sure, I can make the same amount of money every year, but it was a heck of a lot of work. And it could be really unpredictable. You could have, both units in a duplex become vacant in a month, and then you're 100% vacant. And it's wildly unpredictable. And as you scale. And so I found with the larger properties, if you run it tight and you have, good management and you pay attention to the details, you can predict what your income is going to be every month. And I just got to a point in my life where I'm like, I just want a steady paycheck out of this business. I don't want to have that level of unpredictability. And so, from a syndication standpoint, you get a distribution every quarter. As the GP, we have that piece, and it becomes something where you're within a few percentage points of what you budget and plan out every year. And I found that that was that other aha moment. So with some of my smaller and even medium-sized multifamily properties, the 25 units and the 50 unit type of thing that I had, is that I went back and I had a 26 unit I bought in 2008. And I ran the numbers every year from 2008. And I've never made more or less than a few $1,000s. Like, for instance, that property makes $115,000 a year on average. Mm-hmm. It's never been below 112 and never been above 118.
Okay.
Man, that's a clue. And I looked at my other properties like that, and they're all within a few thousand of each other. And I said, well, this is a lot better than chasing down that single family home that becomes vacant and sits vacant for 4 months because you've got to pull out the trash and carpet and paint and exterminate and do all those things. So I just, it was one of those things I sort of self-realized as we went on is, these larger properties, if you run them well, just create that level of predictability that you want as an owner. But I would say that it's really easy to sell to somebody looking to invest passively in your deal that, okay, if we've modeled this correctly, this deal correctly, then you're going to get, this return on your investment every quarter, every year that you're involved in the deal.
So the predictability has become very key, I guess, and the scalability, because you have a lot more units, and you would have budgeted for occupancy loss and vacancies and expenses and all that in the bigger one, and you have a lot more room for error, right, in terms of occupancy, I would say, compared to single family and the duplexes.
Right.
I would say. Right. Interesting. So was the experience that you gained from quads and duplexes, did it help you out when you come to syndication and run these bigger, larger properties?
100%. I think a couple things. I think having my own money into the business and building it with my wife's and my own hard-earned money, you win, the wins are all yours and the mistakes are all yours too. And so, we started out painting our own units, cutting our own grass, leasing the units up ourselves. And then even for building, our own employees, it was us kind of managing those employees a lot early on and dealing with tenants, dealing with tough situations. So, if it comes down to me managing a property manager, I've got that track. Not that I know it all. I still feel like I'm learning every day, but I have that some level of experience to say, well, hey, here's how we should handle this situation because, we've seen this, or this is the type of scenario that we've dealt with. And I think when it came down to raising money for these last couple of deals, having a track record and saying, you know what, I've not only have I learned how to finance properties, not only have I learned how to manage properties, we've dealt with private money, we've dealt with tenants, we've sort of worked at all aspects of the business. I think that's just that earning your doctorate in this business or earning your degree in this business. I think it helps to start out small. Now, I would just say that that's not for everybody. I see some people that are wildly successful jumping into really large syndications, and I certainly would never talk down people's hopes and dreams and goals to go big. But I think that to weather the storms and deal with difficult scenarios and difficult situations, it's always good to have some level of something that you've done on your own, whether it's small and so syndication doesn't become the only, it's not the only way to make money in this business. A lot of us that syndicate do a lot of other things. So you self-own, people may flip, they may be a realtor, be involved in different things. So I just think that having that background and experience, with smaller properties, building a team, those are all things that come in really handy, as it relates to to the larger
ones. Yeah. I'm a strong believer of growing from small, right? Even from single family, quads, duplexes, and then growing. I mean, I know people go direct to, let's start with 100 units plus, right? A lot of gurus teach us that because there's so much money out there and they say you can syndicate. But I think the problem, as you mentioned, right, when the storm comes in, right, I mean, you may not know what happens when the vacancy drops, right? You may not understand the tenant profile, why is certain tenant leaving, right? Especially you're giving to third-party management. So you are basically a pure syndicator, right? You're just a guy who raised money, found the deal, and trying to run a business plan on a booming market, right? I mean, we know a lot of people have been successful, but a lot of people has been successful in the past 9 to 10 years of expansion, right? So we do not know whether they are good or the market was good, right? So we will know once the market turns, right? So how much people know about the science of real estate. I mean, there's so much of things in real estate, like contractor management, right? Understanding tenant demographic, right? When people move in, walk in, how's the leasing experience? There's so much of science behind it. You wouldn't understand it if you're in a strong market, right? You think, oh, it's going up to 95% occupied. Oh, I'm making money. Oh, cap rate is compressing. Nothing on your effort, right? But when the cap rate is decompresses, right? That's then when the tenants leave or when your market is not doing very well. I mean, you have to have that skills to manage that budget, to manage that shift, right? And I think it's important to start from small. That's what I feel. I mean,
I'll give an example. I had, since we self-manage, I'm not the one out, showing units and advertising the units, but I was between property managers, had one guy phasing out, and he actually bought several properties from me. And so he had, he kind of graduated into, being his own, full-time investor. And I had a new guy coming on, and we were about a month in between. And the first deal I syndicated, it's an 86 unit property. It had 16 vacancies. And I'm like, not only am I an investor on the general side, I put my money in as a limited. Like, well, I can't live with 16 vacancies. So I went out and I showed units myself. I got things rented and did the hard work. Not that my time shouldn't be spent doing that. I don't love that. But I know how to do it from years and years of doing it early on. So I went out and I got like a dozen units rented in a month and got that down to 4 out of 86. And then when our new property manager started, he was able to just kind of hit the ground running. But so I think that's like an example of why it's good to be able to, have that experience. And like you mentioned contractor management. I mean, you just recently, I know I've seen your, had a disaster at one of your properties. And if you don't know how to deal with contractors and negotiate the best price and make sure they're showing up to work every day and keeping things on a schedule, things can go really wrong when things go sideways in the business. So you have to have that sort of that people management side of it, from dealing with tenants to contractors and banks and all of that kind of stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I just came back. I mean, before this podcast, I was sitting like almost 2 hours with one of my property, which we are recovering, with my property manager regional, and planning out the make ready, plan, right? And how do we do this? Because sometimes, you can't expect them to do that whole plan, right? I mean, sometimes we have a lot more planning skills and I have to tell them, plan day one, do this, how many units. So I have to give them each plan so that we recover very quickly. And you can't do that if you don't have the real, single family or quads or duplexes, construction experience, right? You can't do that because you're going to be taking the words from the property manager or your regional, right? Right. So yeah, I think it's important that we really learn the science of real estate, especially now when the market's good, right? It's hard to learn when the market's bad because things are really going wrong at that time, right? So that's very interesting. So how is Pennsylvania market? Can you describe it? I mean, I never interviewed anybody from Pennsylvania, and I like to understand the market and how do you underwrite the deals over there. So at high level, you did all your deals in Pennsylvania because you live there, I guess, as your backyard.
I did. By default, when I started out buying singles and doubles, and we were doing it ourselves, I didn't know any other way. I'm like, why would I buy something in Cleveland? And I got to drive an hour and a half every day to Cleveland. So, Pennsylvania is a funny state. So we have Philadelphia on one side of the state, Pittsburgh on the other side of the state, and in between, and no offense to anybody else in Pennsylvania, but it's like it's Kentucky. I mean, it's just farms and everything else, and it's not. There's not a whole lot of population, but there's areas like Harrisburg, Scranton, Erie, where I live, and so there's these tertiary markets, and so Philadelphia and Pittsburgh are like any other bigger market where cap rates are compressed, and they have a ton of population. There's a ton of employment, but I'm a big fan of the tertiary markets and places like Erie, Pennsylvania, or York, Pennsylvania, or even like Dayton, Ohio. I'd consider a tertiary market. Canton, Ohio, Akron, Ohio, Rochester, New York is a secondary market, but maybe a smaller town around that, for instance. Mm-hmm. So, and my reasoning being that, when we have areas like Denver and Nashville or Austin, Texas, that had, over a period of time had, net population growth of, million people or more over a 10-year period. When 2008 happened, or after 9/11, and there was this huge pullback in the economy, and people were losing jobs, and employers, unemployment goes up to 8 or 9%. Those are areas where people are losing jobs. Those are areas where the rents kind of pull back because all of a sudden there's these in multifamily. You do value add after value add, and rents have reached this peak. At some point, when the economy turns, those rents have to pull back. So the flip side is where there's not a ton of growth, like in Erie, Pennsylvania, it is slow and steady. So, in 2008, home sales slowed down, but the values never went the other way. And then we still live in an area where, we have several universities, we have several hospitals, we have the nation's largest medical school in Erie, Pennsylvania. And so there's a lot of students, there's manufacturing jobs, there's other like medical and some technical type jobs, but just a smaller geographic area, smaller economy. Now the downside is, we never have this wild boom in prices, and you can't really ever bank on a lot of appreciation. But at the same token, when the economy pulls back, our rental base really isn't going to be affected. So, for instance, if I have a $700 or $800 a month apartment, and 20 tenants lose their jobs, well, they'll still be able to afford their rent on unemployment. It may be tough for them, but it's not as though they're paying $1,500 a month in rent. And so, so I look at it from a practical standpoint that, well, I should be able to, maintain my occupancy levels and fight through an economic downturn. And so the nice thing with Erie, and it kind of proved itself out in this last syndication, we had several people from out of state come in and really like the idea that there's this level of predictability that, mm-hmm. Okay, when the market turns, we're not going to lose 100,000 jobs in Erie, because there's 100,000 people that live in the city of Erie, and there's another 250,000 that live in the surrounding county. So our greater metro area is about 350,000 people. That's still sort of a small area, and the largest employer might employ 5,000 people, and there's several larger small employers like that. But so the economy's set sort of stable. You go to Gary, Indiana, or places like that, same thing. And so the other thing that would protect somebody on the downside is just making sure you have optimal financing locked in. For our most recent deal, we locked into 12-year fixed as opposed to 10-year fixed. Even though the prepayment or yield maintenance is to 9.5 years, we have a little bit of flexibility. So if we are in an economic downturn, I saw it in 2008, see a lot of people lose their investment. I think, locking into something that gives you that flexibility to weather, a national or international economic downturn, at least for a few years, not that you can totally time the market, but you have enough flexibility to when you want to exit the property. But it's not just Pennsylvania, it's these other smaller markets. I mean, I think if you're in it for the long haul and that's your strategy is like long-term cash flow, I think, you can't really go wrong with these smaller areas. There's jobs, and they're not the highest paying jobs, they're not the growing areas, but you just have to it's a different sort of business model. We told our investors in these deals, hey, this is a 10-year hold. And if you, and we may hold it longer if you want to stay in longer. And I think that people like that idea as opposed to like doing like a 3-year payback or a 5-year refinance. Like we're just holding into it longer. And I think it's a different strategy. But it fills a need for investors that want sort of that long-term stability and predictability.
Yeah, I mean, real estate in general is a long-term play, right? So,
Yeah.
is Pennsylvania a landlord-friendly state? I'm not
Fair.
sure whether you know what it means because you only buy that. You didn't compare to Texas or anybody else.
But as you know, we have friends.
Okay.
Some of the same friends around the country, and what I will say is it's not like California and it's not like New York. So
okay,
you do these horror stories where it takes months and months to evict somebody. Pennsylvania is fair. There's actually some legislation to make it even better. But speaking from a practical standpoint, if you have to evict somebody and you follow the letter of the law, like to the day, it's about 40 days.
Oh, okay, that's not bad.
It's not too bad.
Yeah, correct.
And it's fairly easy. Especially if you're looking to terminate a lease, for behavioral issues or whatever. It's not you can't get them out in 10 days, but it's not, you're not waiting 3 or 4 months to get rid of somebody. And
got it.
People have to, if tenants appeal, not to get too far in the weeds, but if they appeal an eviction, they have to put their money into an escrow fund. They have to, they just don't let the tenants dictate the policy. There's actual things in place that make sure that it's so overall, I'd say it's more landlord friendly than most.
Yeah, I think it's almost similar to what we have in Texas. I'm sure there's more details there, but in terms of eviction and putting money in escrow when they get evictions and all that, it's similar to what we have in Texas. So, and what about underwriting? So when you underwrite deals, multifamily deals in Pennsylvania, does your taxes goes up as per the purchase price, and how much % does it go up? How do you underwrite?
Yeah. So they on smaller properties they don't. I think if you're in more distressed, let's just say places where opportunity zones would be occurring, those types of like C and D class neighborhoods, they wouldn't because the municipality wants people to continue to invest there, but. We budget for a tax increase based on there's a common level ratio that based on the purchase price and the value of the property, and we should budget for X amount of dollars of a.
But how many % do you go up to purchase price? Is it like 100% of purchase price times tax rate, or is it 80, 90, 70?
Yeah, it's about 80% of the purchase price.
Got it.
And but what I would say is that. We've appealed that before. So I had as an example, I bought an 8 unit. It wasn't a big property. I paid a premium for the deal. I paid a little more than it would have sold for on the open market. But the seller had said, "Hey, look, I'll sell it to you at this price." They held the paper at a 25-year fixed rate at 4%, no balloon, no prepayment penalty, and I had to put 5% down. Great property. The returns are great, but I paid more than it was worth. There's different ways to look at that, but that was flagged for a tax increase. And so, we fought that and, had made a very strong argument that, well, look, this is the reason we bought this was because of premium financing. And I've seen a friendly neighbor, they bought of one of my properties, they bought a very large complex and they're fighting a reassessment because even though they put a certain amount of money into the property and it's a large complex, they're arguing that, hey, it's going to take, we paid a premium because there's not a lot of property around like this, but it was severely distressed. And then we're not going to see a return on our investment for X amount of years. And so I think oftentimes, rather than just try and fight the assessment as a fight, sometimes you can go in and negotiate and create a situation where, you talk to the board so here there's a board of folks that they work for the school district, for instance, at, the appropriate school districts, and say they flag these properties and they try and increase your taxes. So as the property owner, you have to go in with a realistic approach to say, hey, look, I know these taxes are going to go up, but hey, I bought a property that, and here's why we paid more for it, or here's the story, and here's how long of the time it's going to take to increase the taxes. And sometimes getting a little bit more personal, and you still want an attorney involved, and you still want be able to, as someone experienced with that type of, that type of appeal. But I think that oftentimes if you, kind of go into it with a positive intention and truly are, if you are at it doing a value add to the property and things like that, you're able to kind of create, some sort of negotiation that those boards will oftentimes, like, at least in smaller areas, are typically friendly. I mean, I don't want to jinx myself and get into a situation where your taxes double, but I think you can oftentimes negotiate what that actual raise would be. But to answer your question, though, when it comes to underwriting, we'll typically still budget that common level ratio, which is 80% of the purchase price, to say, hey, when we're budgeting worst case scenario, here's what the taxes are, and here's what we have. So here's what we have to budget. And hey, great, if they don't get raised, for 5 years, or they don't get raised at all, then we've lucked out. But they've not. We live in an area where they don't look at every single transaction. I mean, I've been fortunate in some instances where the taxes have stayed the same, and I've paid a lot more than what the previous owner did, but they kept the taxes the same. So they're not as aggressive as other areas. But that being said, maybe it's just a matter of time before they really see it. And I just think it's always a matter of, when you underwrite, you have to plan for the worst and plan for those increases. But when they come, like, try to negotiate and try to fight those increases, because more often than not, you can have some level of compromise.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm surprised that you can negotiate to that level, which makes sense, right? I mean, it's just some county, I think they are not very flexible or becoming hard. So what about insurance? I mean, do you get a lot of snowstorm and storms in Pennsylvania? I know it happens, but can you tell us how's the insurance cost that when you underwrite?
Our winters are terrible. I mean, if you like to ski and you like outdoor stuff in the winter, but yeah, so we, I guess our insurance does cover, it does cover for things like a few winters ago, we had a terrible snowstorm. It ended up being the second highest or third highest snowfall of all time in the U.S. in a major metro. It was almost 200 inches of snow that fell that winter. It was disgusting, but there was a lot of roof damage and gutter damage and all sorts of building damage. And so I think insurance companies build that into they build that into their underwriting. But yeah, you plan for those things. We also, as I built my business from a practical standpoint, have always tried to hire maintenance guys that can handle like your general things. Like, if I call a contractor to repair gutters and soffit and fascia, he may bill $10,000, but I know that I could have my guys in house do it for $3,000. So there's, we try to take an approach where if there's a lot of stuff that we can fix, we do it ourselves. But here, really the winters are the worst things that can happen. And so, you have to kind of build that into your plan. But there's a lot of things you can do to mitigate damage in the winter, and it just becomes a different, just a different analysis. I mean, I'm sure people that own properties and like where you're at in Texas or Arizona, where it gets really, really hot, there's other things that they have to do to plan out, for insurance, or if you live in, a hurricane area, same thing. So I think that, when you underwrite from an insurance perspective, especially on the larger deals, they're going to give you a plan. They're going to tell you, hey, these are the things we need you to do. And so oftentimes as the owner operator, you have to take care of those issues, whether it's deferred maintenance or just ongoing maintenance. A lot of your listeners might know that the lender is going to escrow for those repairs. So that keeps you from having, it's that routine maintenance and the ongoing maintenance that you have to do to a property to ensure that you're not just like, waiting for some big insurance claim to happen to put money back in the property. So they force, in a sense, the lender's forcing you to make sure you keep up with your property.
Got it. So you self-manage your own property, and you started from quads and duplexes. Right. Is that right?
Correct. Yeah.
Right. So what do you think is an advantage to self-manage, and what is the disadvantage of self-managing these large apartment complexes where you're buying like 200 and 100 units right now?
I mean, I think I'll start with the disadvantage. And I think the disadvantage is then, you're at some level, you're always involved with managing employees, so you're dealing with those people, you're dealing with tenants and their problems. And now, at our level where I've got a number of employees, I don't have to really get involved at the tenant level too much anymore. But that's sort of the problem, is that you're going to find yourself in the mix and dealing with situations too close to it's all too close to home. And, so if you're a passive investor, you're just getting a return on your money. So when you self-manage, you're really, you're earning that kind of like extra return that you get. But the advantage of self-managing, I think, you can control the property better. You have a better handle on what's going on because you're right at the front lines. I think with a lot of syndicators, at least, even people that have smaller portfolios, and if they try to get a third-party manager, that's the hardest part of the business, is finding quality third-party management. And I think if, somebody said it once, and it's not entirely true, but, somebody said to me once that no one's ever going to manage it as well as the owner. And, I feel like if you have your skin in the game, if you self-manage it, you're going to make sure things go right. Like the idea that I jumped out and tried to fill 16 units when I was between property managers, where if that was with a third-party manager, oh well, right? And I can manage, my property manager and say, hey, look, you have to be refreshing the ads every day on apartments.com. I need you to track your leads and follow up with people. And you can control the process to make sure that you're at the occupancy level that you want, making sure that your maintenance calls are being followed up on. But that is a little bit of a headache. But at the same point, you earn that. I mean, if you self-manage, you're getting typically in a syndication, you're going to have the property management fee, the asset management fee. So yeah, it's work, but it's extra income. And if it's something you enjoy doing, leading a team of people to manage the property, it can be a lot of fun and rewarding too.
Yeah, it's very rewarding because now you're doing the whole pipeline, right? End to end.
Yeah.
How are you controlling your deal, right? So let's go back to your a bit more personal stuffs, right? What do you think is like top 3 things that is your secret sauce to your success?
Okay. Well, I'd say one would be, not giving up, just always maintaining a positive attitude. It sounds so simple, but there are literally things every day, as you know, in this business that make you question, like, why am I doing this? Why am I still, this is driving me nuts. And so I just think, always keeping it, that positive attitude, because, what you focus on expands. And if you're focused on the negative, then all you're going to see is the negative. And so, but it's true in any business, not just apartments. So that's one thing. Number 2, I've had a lot of success with getting off-market deals, whether it's been the 205 unit or the, or a duplex when I was starting out. Just really see the value in building a relationship with sellers, building relationships with brokers. And so it's that relationship building part where just try to take a genuine interest in other people and become friends with them. And hey, someday down the line, we may do business, and it always seems to come back in spades, later on. And so that's probably like the second thing I think I'm pretty good at. And the third thing is just, knowing what's a good deal and being able to pull the trigger, not overanalyze too much. I know a lot of times you can get stuck in the weeds in terms of the underwriting and things like that, where you're just spending too much time dealing with, just analyzing it and not pulling the trigger. So that can be a fault at times, but I think that's worked in terms of being able to take down, properties and just make a decision and move forward but knowing when to pull back and knowing when it's, when things aren't right either. So.
Yeah. Interesting. And why do you do what you're doing every day?
Yeah. As I said earlier, when I started out, I was 23 years old and I wanted to be a millionaire. That was great early on, but well, then what, so, at some point it became the ability to, be free of a job and not that for its only sake, but to be around for my family and friends. And you see so many people slave away at a day job and, die young because, they've traded their time for money. So it evolved into that. And really now it's, I feel like, creating better properties in our city, helping improve our area, providing, valid and quality employment on a scale to people that are looking for work. Being able to, again, have that freedom to spend with my family, and again, being able to live a large and rich life, but being able to give back to others, and using some of the using our platform and the kind of money we make to be able to make a better world for other people and give back. So.
Very noble means. And is there a proud moment in your whole real estate career that you think, I'm really, really proud of a thing that you did, right? And that's something that you can never forget.
The easy answer is probably always the most recent deal you've done. I think that for me, probably one of the prouder moments was just being able to walk away from the day job. That was, I was making a really, really good income. And there was probably like a 4 or 5 year period there where I just kept saying, I'm going to leave my job. I'm going to leave my job. And I just finally getting the courage to be able to walk away and take that, have that confidence in myself that I could, that I could do this and have it, be a sustainable living. I just, for whatever reason, was probably filled with more self-doubt than I needed to. So just being able to just kind of barrel forward and do it. I was really proud of that moment.
Yeah, that follows you right until the end. It's a memory, right? So awesome. And I think that's what we have. Jason, why not you tell our audience on how they can get in touch with you and where's the best place to reach you?
Sure. If anybody wants to get on my calendar and have a chat, they can find me on LinkedIn, just at Jason Pero. They can find me on Facebook as well. If you want to add it to the show notes too, you can get my email, jasonpero@yahoo.com. And then my cell phone, I could get that out as well too.
Okay. You don't have to give it out on the podcast, but it's up to you. Okay. So awesome. Thank you very much for joining us, Jason. I really enjoyed learning about the Pennsylvania market and how did you grow from from quads and duplexes to almost 900 units right now under management. And I did learn a lot, and I'm sure my audience will too. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, James.
That's it for this episode. If you'd like to learn even more, check out James's free audiobook. It's the audio version of his best-selling book on passive investing. You can get the audiobook completely free, along with other valuable resources, by visiting www.achieveinvestmentgroup.com/free audiobook. Also, be sure to join our Facebook group too. To find it, just do a Facebook search for Multifamily Investors Group. Thanks for listening. Join us again for another episode next week. See you then.